Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We have another design and discourse. I'm actually really excited about the topic. Today, we're going to be talking about human, animal, and aquatic relationships within the built environment. We have two great speakers. First, we'll hear from Meredith, who's really focused on the aquatic relationships. And then we'll hear from Lauren Hanna, who is focused on canine relationships within the built environment. So I will pass the floor off to Meredith to begin.
All right, thanks, Kim.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and get my screen set up here. Okay, can everybody see this? Looking good? Okay. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Meredith Ball, and this is my senior thesis project. It's titled Beneath the Waves, and we're looking at interior design encountering the aquatic experience. So today I'm just going to be going through my agenda with you. We're going to look at my project overview, my research selections, my precedent research, and then dive into the conditions, context, and project program. Sections 1 through 3 are a lot of what I did last semester, research, and then 4 through 5 are what I've been doing currently this semester. Just to start things off, I'm going to read my thesis statement for you. So interacting with aquatic animals not only captivates our senses, but also holds the promise of enhancing human well-being. This rehabilitation aquarium is designed to transcend the traditional boundaries that separate us from aquatic animals and their natural habitats. And this immersive aquatic experience also invites visitors to engage interactively, fostering a deeper connection with the underwater world. And through innovative exhibits and interactive encounters, visitors can explore the mysteries of marine life, creating meaningful connections that enrich both our understanding of the oceans and our own well-being. So then just going to touch on my abstract. I chose to focus on these kind of 3 elements throughout my project and through the design that I'm going to create. So first off, intellectual. This aquarium space is going to be meticulously designed to cater to varying intellectual levels achieved through a combination of thoughtful curation and just innovative presentations throughout. It just really will seamlessly transform the interior space into an immersive learning environment through integration of compelling narratives, interactive technologies, and scientifically accurate exhibits. And then my second point, so emotional aspects. Really, this one of the conservation programs at this aquarium is huge on sea turtle conservation. So the sea turtle release and rehabilitation area within this aquarium is going to be thoughtfully designed to elicit a range of emotions from visitors, like you're being a part of this, you're helping conserve, you're helping raise awareness for this issue. And then lastly, sensory. So this aquarium space is going to incorporate a lot of sensory designs through a lot of vibrant visual displays, captivating senses of light, and just a lot of showcasing of mesmerizing colors, patterns, and movements of marine life. And then I have 3 project outcomes here. So first, we're going to understand the role of water in the context of the built environment through intellectual curiosity and immersive learning. Number 2, we're going to promote awareness for the interaction between humans and animals through emotional engagement with aquatic wildlife rehabilitation. And then number 3, create a built environment that uses sensory elements to connect humans and aquatic animals. So number 1, why do we have water inside? Why do we have aquariums? Number 2, how do we promote the issues that are in marine life and how do we conserve it? And number 3, how do we do this successfully within the built environment and within the interiors? So last semester was very research heavy. I'm sure you've heard this. And I chose to focus in on 3 sections. So biological considerations, visitor experience and education, and then animal welfare and ethical considerations. And I'm just going to quick skim over these for you today. So biological considerations looked at a lot of optimal habitat design. So a lot of habitats are curated to accommodate a variety of species, forming naturalistic ecosystems that replicate the animal's natural surroundings. And in aquarium design, obviously water quality is of very high importance. And this just directly impacts the health of the marine animals that are housed. And the Seattle Aquarium is actually a good example of committed water quality team that meticulously monitors freshwater and natural seawater in their habitats. And so then I just decided to dive into kind of researching the difference between freshwater and marine regions. So freshwater, just the spark notes, just being lakes and ponds, streams and rivers, wetlands, the basics. This is what we're used to up here in Michigan. And then marine regions being oceans, coral reefs, and estuaries. So diving into visitor experience and education, I looked at the accessibility services at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and they offer a very good selection of just kind of aid to help with visitors who have disabilities. So for guests who are blind, they offer audio tours that are really specifically designed for guests that are blind and available at checkout. And they also have Braille visitor guides that are updated at the information desk as well to help with your visit. And for guests that are in wheelchairs, the Aquarium of the Pacific has their exhibits are all wheelchair accessible, and wheelchairs are also available at the front desk for checkout. And then service animals, if you have a service animal, they are allowed to accompany guests with disabilities, and they're all welcome. And then sometimes there are areas where animals aren't allowed. And for those areas, Aquarium of the Pacific will just help aid that guest and the animal when that arises. For guests who are deaf, they have written descriptions of the shows that are available at checkout, and then also sign language interpreters who are available to assist. And then for guests who have sensory processing needs, they actually partnered with Culture City to prove the ability to assist accommodated guests with sensory needs. And they just have a sensory bag that has like fidgets, headphones, just like a special bag to show that you have sensory processing needs, just things to aid you on your journey. And then my last section here, just diving into animal welfare and ethical considerations. So looking at the bad and the good here. So looking at unethical animal interaction, SeaWorld was a big part of this. And I actually just did a study on Tilikum, the orca whale. He has a very interesting and sad story. But one of the questions are, why are SeaWorlds and other marine parks and pools tanks unfit for orcas? So I have three examples here. So at Sealand of the Pacific, all the orcas are kept in a big net in the marina during the day and night, and they're just put in a dark metal 20 by 30 foot pool for almost 2/3 of their life from 5 to 7 a.m. Just really not a good situation. And then at SeaWorld, orcas are kept in pools and dispersed into separate sections. And in the wild, it's a very matriarchal society, and male whales are actually kept at the perimeter of the group. And in captivity, these animals are just squeezed into really close proximity, and that just doesn't work out. Creates a lot of fights and just not good scenarios. And that kind of brings me down to my graphic here. Actually, all captive whales 100% have collapsed dorsal fins. And this is just because the pools are they're unfit. They're not deep enough. In the wild, whales are in the ocean. The deeper they dive, the higher their dorsal fin will stick up. And so that's just, you don't get that when you're in captivity. So then looking into the good, ethical animal interaction, National Aquarium actually has a really good Sea Turtle Rescue Assistance Act. And just knowing the ethical guidelines for interactive experience with marine life is just extremely important to ensure animal welfare, while also considering and providing meaningful education to visitor interactions. And so National Aquarium has a great conservation goal that really highlights saving the wildlife and the habitats. And I think they have a program set up where you can sign up to further this, but I think guests are able to participate in this as well. And this brings me to my precedent study here. So this is actually a turtle sanctuary in the United Arab Emirates. And I just kind of highlighted some things that I liked about this. So I looked at the location, education aspects, the emotional, and the wayfinding and the signage. And so for the location of this sanctuary, it's situated on one of the most sensitive and biodiverse nature reserves in the Gulf, which really allows this aquarium / like research center to create a sanctuary for rehabilitating turtles in connection with local initiatives and expertise. For the education aspects of this complex is used to really inform visitors and increase environmental awareness. And it also serves as an operational base for research and monitoring of the protected Calbo's Reserve and natural resources. And then some emotional aspects of this space. So in the interior, they have dramatic semi-enclosed ribbed like pods that let through a large amount of natural light, which really aids in clarity throughout the space. They also have a nice palette of light coastal tones that provides a sense of calm and just relaxation throughout the space. And then for their wayfinding and signage, I really liked how they did this. They have like large high contrast text. You can kind of see here the teal lettering here, and a lot of informational graphics that are displayed to just inform visitors of what they're viewing and how to navigate the facility. So then diving into where I'm at now, this is kind of where I started about a month ago. So I chose to position my aquarium on South Padre Island, in the south of Texas. And I just have a zoning map here kind of showing what's on this island. I have a little focused in part here. It's going to be in Andy Bowie Park. And I chose this primarily because there is an existing sea turtle hatchery on this beach. And it's just, I also want this aquarium to be directly on the coast, so it will feel more connected to the natural habitats right on the ocean there. Um, and then I'll get into, so also the neighboring organizations around this location is super helpful to this aquarium. So Sea Turtle Incorporated, here they're a sea turtle hospital, and their mission is to rescue, rehabilitate, and release injured sea turtles to really educate the public and assist with conservation efforts for all marine turtle species. Um, and they really focus in on just education, rehabilitation, and conservation, which is great. And it's really just right down the street from here. And then kind of looking at the South Padre Island landscape and topography, this is just kind of interesting to know when you're thinking about building on this part. So the vegetation here, it's really just a lot of beach grass, grassland, a lot of sandy plain area. The solar path, I'm really going to have to take this into consideration too when designing. A lot of sun from the south, a lot of heat coming in. And then I just have a graphic here kind of showing it's really predominantly flat, with the highest point of elevation measuring to 39 feet. And yeah. And then talking about my project program right now. So I'm starting from scratch and designing my own. And in this first floor of the aquarium, that's going to be the most of the activity. We're going to have most of all of the tanks actually on the first floor. And then I have 3 focus areas that I'm gonna like further develop along the way. So I'm gonna focus on touch pools, conservation areas, and just education areas. So you'll see here right by the entry, I'm gonna have a touch pool exhibit here, with a classroom that kind of branches off of that. And then there is going to be an observation classroom that is like smack dab in the middle of these 3 tanks here. That will just kind of allow you to be fully immersed. Obviously, you're not swimming in the tank, but there's glass on the sides, and you're going to feel like you're inside. And then the education areas, it's going to be on the, oh, I'm sorry, conservation area. On the side right here, there's going to be a tank, and then I kind of want to combine it upstairs too. I want to have a viewing room viewing to out towards that sea turtle hatchery when they do releases. So if you don't want to be directly on the beach, you can go to this viewing room upstairs and participate. And then this is just kind of a further breakdown of my 3 areas. So the touch pool, we're going to have touch pool obviously as the focus point right by the lobby entry. You're going to have a little seating and viewing area and a classroom off the side to kind of further talk about what's being displayed. And then for the conservation area, there's going to be a little sea turtle exhibit along with the tank. I'd imagine we'd be partnering with Sea Turtle Incorporated for any turtles that are inside of this tank for rehabilitation purposes, along with connected to the water lab and maintenance area. And then there's going to be a second floor part as well for that release and viewing area. And then for the education area, like I said, going to have that main observation classroom in between all these 3 tanks. And then the second floor, just going to have a little student workshop and a classroom connected to that. So thank you for listening, and I'll hand it off to Lauren.
Thank you so much. Now we will hear from Lauren.
Hello. Let me share my screen real quick. So mine is from Healing to Happiness, Rethinking the Roles of Animal Shelters and Their Impacts on Canines. So going into today's agenda, I'm going to go over the project overview, the research that I did all last semester and some of the precedent studies, and then my next steps of what I've been working on this semester so far. So starting off, just want to draw attention to why this is an issue and why I'm very passionate about this topic. So I did a study of the 2022 Michigan Animal Shelter Annual Report. So there's 200 shelters in Michigan. And so as you can see, the numbers are very high of the intake, adoption, and euthanasia. And I feel like the studies at the top are up to 20% of dogs are returned after adoption. And out of that 20%, 50 of those are returned due to their behavioral issues. So going into my thesis statement, rethinking the role of animal shelters has the potential to regenerate and transform dogs' lives through specialized behavioral therapy and rehabilitation programs. These initiatives focus on healing and nurturing dogs' behaviors, equipping them with the necessary skills to successfully integrate into a loving adoptive home. By prioritizing regenerative practices, animal shelters can maximize their impacts by preparing dogs for adoption and ensuring their long-term well-being. So then I just wanted to highlight 4 of my key project objectives. And so I just kind of wanted to acknowledge the current role of the practices of animal shelters in connection to behavioral therapy, and then provide dogs with tools they need to successfully integrate into loving adoptive families. Process the effectiveness and regenerative methods to get dogs ready for adoption, and then revise and redesign a current setup of an animal shelter to tailor it specifically to these needs. So going into my research methods, I really wanted to highlight all the different sensors or sensories that dogs have, as well as humans. So humans and dogs have very similar but yet different vision capabilities. So we both have rods and cones in our eyes, and humans have a higher number of cones, which are responsible for perceiving colors and sharp visions. In contrast, dogs have more rods, which excel at detecting motion and functioning in low light conditions. So as you can see to the right, this diagram kind of shows that we can see all colors of the rainbow versus dogs see hues and shades of yellow, brown, gray, and hints of blue. And then humans aim to typically have 20/20 vision versus dogs have 20/40, 20/50, which is a lot more than humans. So this diagram on below is supposed to represent football fields. So what we see from 90 yards, they can see from 480 yards, which is 4 football fields, which is kind of crazy. Going into touch, like us, dogs were developed in natural environments, so they like natural rough surfaces. It makes them feel confident and comfortable in their environment versus like slippery ones make them nervous and cause anxiety in them. So having textures like jute rugs, textured tile and stone, and carpet are all key things to make them feel comfortable when they're in a space. And the diagram on the left just kind of highlights the different parts of a dog's paw. And so it kind of covers their digital pads, claws, dew claws. And I just thought it was really interesting because like humans, if dogs are nervous or stressed, they actually have sweat glands in their paws because dogs don't actually like sweat through their body. And so when they're nervous, they like sweat on their paws and it causes moisture, which even furthers to the point where if it's a slippery environment and they're nervous, it definitely will make them feel anxious. And going into hearing, dogs have exceptional hearing, if you guys have ever heard of like a dog whistle, obviously we can't hear those frequencies, but dogs can. So I thought this diagram on the bottom left was as interesting to show because you can see that we can only hear 20,000 and dogs can hear up to 45,000. And then certain noises that aren't super sensitive to us, but because they can hear such high frequencies can actually affect them. So things like alarm clock, car horns, your keys, drill or power tools, vacuums, and fireworks. And then going into scent. So dogs have up to 100 million olfactory receptors, which basically are like they have their pheromones so they can smell a lot better than us versus we only have 6 million, which is kind of crazy to think about. So like if a dog smells you, they can still remember you like 10 years down the road versus humans. Obviously, we can't do that. And so going into this, dogs, as if you guys know, like the canine unit for police, they can sense like drugs, bombs, and like wars. So because dogs have such a good sense of smell, they're able to do all these jobs. And they can sense different pheromones. So like when we're nervous or put in a fight or flight, we excrete the hormone adrenaline, or if we're like scared or stressed. So dogs can sense that from us. So if you're nervous, your dog's more likely than going to become nervous as well. And certain smells like everyday household cleaners, onions, citrus, and acetone are all super sensitive to them. But I mean, they're strong to us, but not as strong as they would if your dog was to smell them. So I just want to go into the difference between a shelter and humane society versus a rescue. So shelters and humane society are pretty much the same thing. I did the definitions of each. It's just different, usually funding from the state. From humane society versus shelter is more just donations, and a rescue is where usually the animal stays at someone's house or a facility. So going into this Venn diagram between a rescue and a shelter. So shelters usually have more limitations for how many animals they can care for at once. They're often government funded, so they have a very limited budget. They have a less expensive adoption fee. So if, like you can go in, pay for the dog and go home with it versus in a rescue, it's usually they have to do a home visit, have to see if you have other animals where you're living. So it's a longer process. And rescues usually have more funds, so they're able to do more because it's just in people's homes. So there's a lot more availability where the dogs can go because a lot of people are willing to open up their homes to them. And then some similarities between the two are they both provide food, water, and temporary housing for the animals. They usually provide a foster system, and they usually have like their shots spayed or neutered before you are able to take them home. So going into the environmental impacts on canines. So canines need, just like humans, a suitable environment. So somewhere that provides a safe and comfortable and enriching space that meets their physical and psychological needs. So this can be done by focusing on their biological, emotional, social, training, and cognitive needs. So just a couple of these things go into other animal interactions, suitable bedding, playing, loving home, bathing, walks, mental stimulation, and training. Going into the shelter environments. So here, this diagram just kind of shows the standard kennel size, which is usually about 4 by 10 for the minimum. And then they have a guillotine door, which can open and close. So if like someone needs to clean the front of the cage, they can close and lock the door in the back of the space or vice versa. And these are usually like built in to the actual space. So temporary cages should not be used as your primary enclosure. And shelter environments, actually doing all my research, are worse for the dogs. They usually, if they have behavioral issues going in, it usually worsens them. Or if a dog doesn't have any, usually they leave with behavioral issues just because it's such a high stress environment for them, just from right when they're entering to being confined, social isolation, changes in the environment, unfamiliar smells and noises, proximity to other animals. So this kind of ties in all the senses. So if a dog has like sensory issues with not liking like other dogs barking around them, it can become very overwhelming for them. And then I just wanted to kind of differentiate what the difference between a rescue dog, a stray dog, and a surrender dog. So I go into the definitions, calling out which each one is. Going into a rescue canine. So like I said before, usually dogs that are rescued go stay in homes with people. And if any of you have ever looked at Pet Finder, it shows all the dogs that are up for adoption that you can visit with and hopefully take home. They also usually do like adoption events. Shelters sometimes do, but again, it depends on how much funding they have to hold events like this. And because rescues have more funding, they're able to do more. So people can come and visit them, bring their own dogs, see if they'll get along. And obviously every animal varies, but behaviors, depending on rescues, they have less chance of behavioral issues and more training because again, they're in a home. It's a more relaxed environment. They're used to like going outside, coming in, having a bed. So going into the stray canines, again, it's a very high stress environment. So usually they have a lot of overwhelming senses. They're frightened, they're stressed, and they're confused where they're at. So I thought this diagram was really interesting to look at between the primary, secondary behaviors between a stray and a surrendered. So this kind of highlights how some of the primary actions of a stray are they show more aggression, hyperactivity, excessive barking versus a surrendered. They usually experience house training issues, eating disorders, separation anxiety, and destruction. And surrendered canines, I thought this was very interesting to look at over the span of 3 days, how the stress levels of a surrendered and stray. So usually stray, because they were outdoors, being able to be taken care of actually lessens their stress versus a surrendered. They're stressed at first, but then they realize, okay, well, I'm still kind of in an enclosed environment, but then they realize that they're not around the people that they're usually around, so it causes them to become more stressed. And obviously, it's a very difficult decision to surrender your dog. But on the diagram on the right, obviously shows that there's issues that they're out of their control, such as housing issues, owner's death, aggressive behavior, and the owner's financial situation. And this can cause a lot of stress on the animals because they're being separated from the people that they've always known. So going into some of my precedent studies, this one is the Blacktown Animal Rehoming Center. This one's in Australia. I really like this one because, again, I really want to focus on the sensory issues of the dogs. So I like that it split it into different wings. So one can be for animals that are quiet and don't like a lot of barking, ones that have certain smell sensory issues. So I really liked how it separated the building into different portions. And like this one has cats and dogs, but so it separates them so they're not around each other. And then going into this one is called the Dog Center in Moscow. This one was never actually built, it's just a schematic design, but I really liked it because it has a lot of natural lighting. It's outdoors in the woods, so it's a very natural environment for the dog. They can get a lot of exercise, natural air. And I also like that dogs can become very overwhelmed when they're staring at each other. So if you've ever been in a shelter, usually the dogs are on each side and just stare at each other through the fence. So that can actually cause anxiety in some dogs. So I really liked how this one separated the dogs into, so they weren't just staring at each other. So going into the site that I picked, this was actually one of my precedent studies, and it's located in Pontiac, Michigan. And I really like this one because I kind of wanted to do a smaller building and build off of an existing, because I'm not really looking to like redesign a complete animal shelter. I rather want to take existing ones and implement ways that you can help with these sensory issues, such as different materials, how the natural lighting is, the way the kennels are set up. So I really like this one, and I thought there was a lot of potential in it. So I kind of broke it down into what works in it, what was achieved, what I want to implement, and things that didn't work well. So providing a spatial separator so the dogs can't see each other. So there's a little atrium in the middle, which also allows natural lighting to come in. And then breaking up the corridor to create acoustical properties. So I don't know if you can see, but there's little doors in between each space. So then when the dogs are like barking, it's not as echoey. And if there's certain dogs that don't bark as much, you can put them in that portion. And then I wanted to add an additional corridor for staff to have direct access to the dogs' kennels from the back without having to walk in front of all the dogs. So this is for if they need to like clean the kennel, feed them, give them water. And then they didn't provide direct access from the kennels to adoption rooms. So instead of having to take the dog all the way from their kennel to like across the shelter, so people can like meet with the dog, or if their dogs need to meet them, it's just pretty much direct access to the kennels themselves. And then the kennels, because it's in Pontiac, Michigan, it is a heavily populated area. So the outdoor area that they currently have for the dogs is actually facing a high traffic street, and there's actually a gas station right to the left of it. So being able to create a separator so the dogs don't see all the movement, because it can cause a lot of anxiety in them. And then I'm not going to be touching the back portion, which is like where the veterinary office is, isolation, birthing rooms, all of that. I'm just going to mainly be focusing on the front entrance, and then the actual kennel portion of the building. So that's not in scope. Yeah, that is mine.
Thank you both so much. I love the topic of animals. One thing that I find like really interesting is the personal relationship that you have to your topics. How come that these were your research pursuits and your kind of capstone directions for each of you?
Yeah, I guess I didn't mention that, but my dog that I currently have right now, I got him from a humane society. And well, I guess every dog that I've ever had, that my parents have, that I've had growing up, we've always adopted an animal from a shelter. And then my mom also fosters dogs. So it's kind of sad to constantly see dogs come and go because she probably has a new dog like every other week. So it's just kind of crazy how many animals that actually need help. So that's my personal connection.
Yeah.
I think for me, when I was younger, I was really like interested in just whenever we would go like to a field trip to an aquarium, I would get super excited. I think every kid does, but I think it's a really cool experience to be inside and just have water like around you, but then also learning about what is encased. And I know I'm trying to come at it at a very like conservational way, because there's a lot of cruelty that comes along with keeping animals in captivity. But it becomes more of like a sustainable and healthier environment once you are involved in a conservation effort for something. Like, for example, sea turtles is predominantly what I'm envisioning this space to host, and help. So, yeah. And my friend actually lives in Corpus Christi, Texas. So she's around that area a lot, and she's involved a lot she's been to a sea turtle release here and there. And um, she said it's a super cool experience, and I hope to go to one someday myself. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, Meredith, you mentioned in one of your slides varying intellectual levels that you want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure to accommodate through your design considerations. You also kind of connected the emotional relationship with the educational relationship. Have
Right.
you considered, what is that emotional educational relationship at different intellectual levels? Or, what are your findings on that so far?
So I'm kind of finding that all three of these honestly work together and pair really well. I think the whole experience of walking through an aquarium is kind of encompassed, to be emotional. I mean, everybody has different range of emotions, but you can't help but feel something when you're learning about an endangered species and you're being part of something, like you're personally helping something by visiting a space like this and just furthering your education. I think a lot of people come to these spaces because they are, in a sense, like kind of exotic because we don't normally get to see or be around that type of stuff. I mean, I think the closest we get to is like the aquarium and the dentist office that like everybody sees when they go. But um, I think it's like you're feeling something different and your senses are kind of like it can be overstimulating sometimes, but I think it's also really good for the mind and kind of like relaxes. Blue is a really calming color. And like I said in my precedent study, they have a really nice like light palette, very calm, which kind of like draws your attention into what they're showing, but then also just makes you feel better as a person.
Yeah, so you're really interested in evoking, somebody to
Yes,
have an emotional response, and then maybe they have a better chance of being educated. Because it sounds like
exactly.
your experience growing up left an emotional memory on you
Yeah, for sure.
that's
Yeah.
lasted.
Yeah. Still
I heard,
does.
I heard you use the word, I wrote them down, encompassed and immersive.
Hmm.
And yeah, those are two kind of interesting things when we think about like fully immersive learning.
Yeah.
Have you considered how that would manifest physically in an environment? Like, as a, you know, as opposed to sitting in the dentist office, like you said, and just like it's a piece of furniture. But now
Yeah.
you're really thinking about it as an architectural gesture that we, and,
Mhm.
you know, the humans go inside architecture usually. So,
Yeah.
um, what is that? Yeah. Are you starting to get into that phase, or have you already thought about like the level of immersion?
So I have, and I think in my bubble diagrams I kind of highlight it. But that one of that class, the main classroom that's going to be on that first level there will I consider to be like kind of almost fully immersed. Between those three tanks, there's going to be windows on like three walls, and so you're just going to be constantly watching the activity that's in those tanks, and further learning about what's happening because there will be an instructor of some sort teaching in that room. And another aspect that I'm going to architecturally kind of study and create myself, I want to create a touch pool area. And a lot of times for touch pools, you have to have like rock formations and natural elements that are from like the animal's habitat to make it feel more homey, obviously, and help further their lives. But yeah, just kind of studying like the different heights of like standing height touch pool, kind of shorter heights for children, thinking like how this is going to feel in, do you want it in the middle of the space? Do I want it off to the side? What kind of lighting do I want to show? Like how is the lighting going to illuminate the water, and what lighting is best for the creatures that are in the touch pool? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of
So
what I'm.
that you said something really interesting. The classroom that you're
Mhm.
talking about that will have three of the walls will be transparent and connected to tanks.
Yep.
Three different tanks, or one tank that's encompassing it?
Three
Or
different.
three different. So it's
Mhm.
possible. Is it possible? Have you thought about the views of like the individual animals inside, looking across and seeing like a different, like a
Yeah.
habitat, like the tank, because they'd be different habitats. It just is a
Well, I
really
think
interesting kind of transect idea.
so the thing is trying to decipher like how, as a designer, like what do I have control over? I'm thinking that this aquarium will house like much of the same from the same region. So there won't be like it's not going to be like freshwater across the way next to,
Sure.
sharks in the tank. Like that's not we're not going to mix that. But like we'll have, I don't know, for an example, like jellyfish in one and like those rehabilitated sea turtles in the other. Like those, it's in the same ocean, but they're not normally next to each other. So I always think of the Nemo example, like the sea turtles out
True.
there and
Yeah, well, I'll be really interested to see how the lighting design comes through, thinking about what is the natural, habitat lighting for
yeah.
the habitats, and then the lighting that's needed for all of the functions of the building. Kind of that's also probably something similar that Lauren's looking at too, is lighting. How I know that you mentioned like the colors, the vision. Have you
Yeah.
thought about how that would translate into lighting design, and how lighting design could kind of work its way into like therapeutic or cathartic, comforting aspects of the shelter?
Yeah, moving on to what I've done more this semester that I didn't include in the presentation, just looking at like all the environmental needs, FF&E, and all of that. Obviously I want to include colors that the dogs are able to see, and also like about calmness, and like I'm not gonna do like a bright yellow wall. Um, so I'm gonna do more like muted tones, but I want to bring a lot of natural light. So it's more, they can have a sense of like the time of the day, and things like that. So I'm hoping that lights up most of the space, and then also to use LED lights was actually a big thing. Um, and I can't remember the exact reason why, but it is in my booklet that I didn't include right now. But I know that LED lights are what should be used in an animal shelter, not just for like things like sterilization, because it actually helps with things like that, but it's actually better for the animals. So I'm trying to find the balance of because the more research I did, the animals are supposed to have a sense of like what time of the day it is because it keeps them on like their natural track of how like humans are. Like you should know when it's night, you should know when it's day. So I want the natural lighting to do a large portion of lighting up the building. So when it's like nighttime, obviously lights will be on, but a majority of when it's dark out, I want it to be dark in the shelter.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I read somewhere that dogs require more sleep than humans.
Yeah.
Has that come into your research? I'm thinking now you mentioned the circadian rhythm essentially. Is
Mm-hmm.
circadian rhythm different for dogs because they require so much more sleep just for their basic functions?
Not really. I mean, I looked at that a little bit in my research, but I didn't really dive into it. I think it's just basic, like, I mean, think about it, it's middle of the day and your dog's napping. And so it doesn't really like affect them what time of the day it is, but like dogs do sleep a lot more than humans.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like I've been hogging all the questions. Does anybody in the audience have any questions you'd like to ask? Feel free to unmute and ask or type in the chat too. Oh, we've got one in the chat. For both presenters, oh, they are coming in now. What do you believe to be the most challenging part of this whole process?
Um,
You can be honest.
I mean, honestly, all of it, trying to find like the right research, because I know when I started this, it was kind of like I had to pick what I wanted to focus on. Like, for example, the building that I'm doing, I knew I needed to focus mainly on the kennel portion because that's what all my research is on, is like the dog's sensory. But then I was like, oh, but I could also do this and like the back area, and how does like the vet have connection to this? How does like the intake process? But at the same time, like that's not what I'm focusing on. So it's kind of hard to decipher, okay, this is a bigger picture, but at the same time, we only have like a semester for the design part and the research part. So it's trying to figure out, okay, not trying to overwhelm myself and just pick one thing to focus on without it being like, I'm never going to finish this, which it always feels like that, but we're going to do it at some point.
It's hard to do that with projects that you're passionate about,
Yeah.
editing yourself and forcing yourself to narrow it down and be specific. What about you, Meredith?
Honestly, I was going to say just about the same thing. I think it's been a challenge for me to kind of hone in on my focus points and parts of this design where I'm going to further develop. Like Lauren said previously, in last semester, we researched a ton. Like that whole semester is dedicated to research. So you have an opportunity to dive deep into a lot of different things. And I think for myself, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. I want to do this. Like I kept learning about new different things and I wanted to like incorporate it. But like at one point I had to tell myself, okay, like I can't design an orca pool. Like I'm not going to do that. And I can't do that in a whole semester. And like same thing with focusing. That's kind of why I chose those three, just to like further develop, because I could do like, okay, we're gonna do offices for this aquarium and we're gonna do a gift shop and like let's focus on the lobby, and like I could do all those things, but it's just in order to organize time for myself, I need to hone in on specific things. So that's kind of been a challenge, I would say.
Yeah.
Another question, how long has it taken for both of you to gather all the information used in the slides? So I should preface the presentations that you saw today was a compilation of an entire semester's worth of work, the entire fall, and it seems like a lot has been updated and edited and continued even since then. But if you want to quantify it even more, I don't know, Meredith, Lauren.
I mean, technically, I mean, personally, I didn't really started that much in the summer, but we had to start thinking of the ideas that we wanted to do the summer even before last semester. And then we did all the research, and like our booklets are actually like 60 pages long. So there's actually a lot more that you guys aren't seeing, but we had to, scrunch it down into a small presentation. So there is a lot more. It took all last semester, and then obviously we're continuing on this semester, but it's more now like the design aspect rather than research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, piggybacking off of Lauren, like I thought about what I wanted to do over the summer, and then I actually changed my topic like a little bit into the last fall semester. And so not to say that all that research and thought like went to waste, like it was still related to what I'm doing now, but um once you find something that you're like passionate about and you're interested in, research kind of kicks into high gear and you're able to like do it a little faster and like gain information and just turn that into graphics and display that in your booklet. So yeah, there is a lot of information that I'm not showing you today here as well. But to get it into a presentation to kind of like Spark Notes version of what I'm doing, like you kind of have to hone in on specific things that make the project what it is.
Yeah.
All right, well, not really a question. This is from Bianca. Not really a question, but the information about the dog senses compared to the human senses really helps us understand more psychologically and physically about each other. I thought that was really interesting to learn because of how the environment affects it as well.
Yeah. That was a big part of my research, was trying to compare it to humans. So not only was I doing research on dogs, but I also had to do humans, because I feel like if I was like, oh, dogs can hear 45,000 high frequencies, like you'd been like, okay, what is that compared to like us? So I had to really find like, how can I compare it to humans as well?
I like that you can just like rattle off the frequency numbers like it's all right, another question from Natalie. Lauren, you mentioned you didn't want to completely design a shelter from scratch. Was there a specific reason you wanted to work with an existing building?
Yeah, so that was actually a big part that I went back and forth, because like I said, shelters don't have a lot of funding, so it's not like they're just gonna build this new like high-end shelter that has all these things to help with dog sensory issues. So I really wanted to try to use an existing building, because the things that I want to try to implement are more things that then any shelter can take in and work on. So it's not just like, well, oh, shoot, we can't build a new, shelter. It's more like, oh, okay, we can take these materials, these type of doors, this HVAC system, like stuff like that, and can put it into current shelters. So I just wanted to show that being shown with an existing building of how that can work.
Yeah, that's so true, is that it's takeaways that existing structures can do to improve the everyday lives of the animals there.
Yeah.
All right, one from Lolly. For Lauren's presentation, for blocking out the view of the parking lot and gas station for the dogs inside the kennel, do you have any ideas on how you would like that to happen?
I mean, besides putting like a fence, that like one that you can't see through, that's kind of my only idea, because I still want it to be like outdoors, fresh air, so I don't want to keep it like enclosed. Um, and I mean, you can't really block out the sound of like cars driving by with that being. So I'm thinking of maybe just having like in a fenced in yard, but not like an actual fence, like a whatever those are called, where it's like boards or something where you can't see through unless you're looking over.
Like a privacy barrier?
Yeah.
Okay. And then another one. I know you both mentioned that your topics are personal to you, but was it difficult landing on a topic? Oh, because you probably threw out other ideas, before landing.
Honestly, yeah, I had no idea for the longest time what I wanted to do. And then like I was talking to Meredith and them and like my family and my boyfriend, and I was just like, okay, anyone give me ideas. Like I have no idea what I want to do. And then randomly one day my mom was like, oh, what about Lincoln? Like look at animal shelters. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. Because that's something that I actually would like enjoy. Because that's a hard thing, is like there were a couple things I was like, okay, yeah, that would be fun. But it's something that you want to spend a whole year like researching, developing, building. Like has to be something that you actually like to do, or else by the end of it, you're gonna hate your topic because you weren't passionate about it in the first place. So it took me a while, and then one day someone just said it, and I was like, oh, yep, that's what I'm doing.
I think it took kind of same thing. It took me a while too. And when I first, like over the summer, when I first started thinking about this whole project, I was really into like community pools and like aquatic centers. And I just kind of kept thinking about it. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this, but like, I know I want to do something with water inside. So I was like really stuck for a minute. And I was like, I don't know how to. And for a while, I was like, maybe I'll just create a space with like water inside of it. But then I was like, that doesn't have any meaning. So I was like, okay, well, and then one day it just kind of popped into my head like aquariums. Like they're really interesting spaces and everything's inside. And yeah, it's just like I said, like kind of have emotional connection to it too. And it's been interesting to research these spaces and kind of check out what different ones look like and what special activities and um, events they have to show and share and how they affect the surrounding community. So yeah, took a while.
I know that at the beginning, you were asking these large questions like, why do we even bring water inside? Like, what is the what is the
Mm-hmm.
meaning of it? Like, what's the benefit of it? What, like, how does that function for us? And I really appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that you included kind of that question at the beginning of your presentation, because it laid a really good groundwork for how you built up more information. Oh, and a question on the chat. Any tips on drawing apps or websites for creating the best diagrams? Or do you think that by hand and scanning is best? You must have been inspired by Meredith's illustrations.
So I predominantly work a lot in the Adobe Creative Cloud to kind of compile everything together. But I've always been quicker at drawing things with my hands. I have an iPad and just an Apple Pencil, and I kind of go to town on it. And but like in terms of making graphics and diagrams, I would say Adobe InDesign is what I use the most, and it comes out really clean. And to make things like I'll make a graphic, but then I'll put it inside like a solid circle that has a nice line weight to it, and you can do that in InDesign, make it look really clean. So yeah.
Yeah, I use InDesign, and then also I know you don't want to spend the money, but invest in an iPad. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have one the first 2 years of college. And like granted, like you guys do a lot of hand drafting and everything and like in Illustrator and InDesign, but the more like junior and sophomore year, it's a lot of making posters and diagrams and stuff. And like I use Procreate for so many things. And even if it's just like, I don't know, something that I find online and then you just draw over it and make it your own is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
All right. Any last questions from the audience? Okay. Well, I think then that will conclude the design and discourse. Thank you so much, Meredith and Lauren. Really interesting, and I look forward to seeing where all of this work takes you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.